We will cross, this is the debris cloud crossing 35, the front side of it as a pullback, and there's some you can just see the massive force of this storm. Coming up here in a second, I made my way over to Midwest Regional City Hospital, and you're going to be seeing some people being taken in, being treated. I'm pretty sure that there was one fatal there that was brought in. We should be seeing this video here pretty quick. That's the Moore Water Tower right there, and this is Midwest City Regional Hospital, and people there are.
Videotape evidence of that. These storms are likely to continue on a northeastern track all the way up into Kansas and Missouri. I'm just being told we have Governor Frank Keating of the state of Oklahoma, who is dealing with this disaster in his state, on the phone to talk with us live across the country. And Governor, good evening. What steps have you already taken to deal with this?
Well, hi, Brian. I wish I were talking to you under other circumstances,
yes, sir.
But we do have a mess. This system, and I'm an old guy, but I'm not an oldest of the old guys, and nobody can remember systems this large, tornadoes this large. Matter of fact, there's one right now north and west of Oklahoma City that's over a mile wide. And obviously, we know 400 to 600 homes have been destroyed, and I've called out the National Guard. We have James Lee Witt, the head of FEMA, coming in first thing in the morning. And, of course, all of the resources we can muster, from churches to Salvation Army to our own local authorities, the National Guard and the Highway Patrol and others, we will do, but it's a mess. There are probably a number of towns, small towns, that have been completely destroyed, but we don't know yet because there's no way to know. And it certainly is the most serious situation I've ever seen. It's absolutely incredible.
And Governor, I guess all we do know is the more than likely and general future path of this cluster of storms, although saying that there's no excuse for further deaths and injuries because people have fair warning is not fair because of the erratic nature of these storms, and power is out and communications are out all the way ahead of these storms, correct?
Well, Brian, that's right, and the best advice I can give and you can give to our listeners is if you're in a car and they say get off the road, get off the road. We had interstates up through Oklahoma City, Interstate 40 and 35, and the warnings went out and people kept driving, and literally there are dozens and dozens of cars pancake flattened, thrown all over the place, and obviously what's inside isn't going to be pleasant to see. And we don't know yet, obviously, the number of fatalities and injuries. We do have a lot of injuries. Most of the major hospitals have called everybody back in, but if there is a warning, you're the most vulnerable place to be, obviously, is on a road, so take shelter immediately, get to a low place, but get off the highway.
Governor, like the horrible Oklahoma City explosion, for those unfamiliar with your part of the world out there, the only solace you probably have tonight is knowing of the good people of Oklahoma, knowing that television news anchors are already asking for donations, talking about making them themselves, and you know that the people of that area have an enormous capacity to cope with loss.
Well, that's right. People here handled the tragedy from the outside, a man-made tragedy, very well. Here, another tragedy from the outside, this time a natural tragedy. But we on occasion have rough weather, but this is absolutely unprecedented, and the dollar loss is going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Of course, now we just need everybody's prayers that these storms will stop and go back into the sky, and that nobody in surrounding states will be affected. But this is the roughest system I've ever seen.
What's your next stop tonight, Governor?
Well, I'm trying to handle it from the mansion, and then in the morning I'm going to get up real early and go down and get a helicopter up about 6:30, about first light, to see what we're looking at. But as I said, I have never heard of something like this, and obviously as a child of the plains, you hear a lot about tornadoes, but that nothing like this has ever occurred in my lifetime. Obviously, maybe some grandfathers out there heard about stuff like this, but a populated area, a storm a mile wide, you've got big problems.
Governor, as always, and I join you in hoping next time it'll be under better circumstances, a frequent guest on our primetime broadcast here, Governor Frank Keating of Oklahoma, a man who has had to deal with so much disaster during his terms as governor of that great state of Oklahoma. Governor, thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Bye-bye.
It's coming! Time for me to move.
That was my photographer, Steve Pusateri. We knew at that moment time had run out. You could see the folks under the bridge taking cover. They got stopped there in the street in Midwest City. This is, once it passed over us, just an incredible wall. The tornado was just so huge. You see the debris flying around.
My daughter's at 4th and Eastern and more in a convenience store, and it's going right through town, and I'm scared.
Just wanted to keep pictures just in from David Payne watching this storm. This is the one that he's been talking about, large tornado.
Huge, we call it a debris shroud out ahead of it, which is still packing quite a wall. There's still a lot of debris flying on the eastern side of it, anywhere from 90 to 100 miles an hour.
Mike, this is Mike.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
This storm is almost a mile wide. It is about a mile on the west side of H.E. Bailey right now. It seems to be following the path of the interstate pretty closely. It hasn't gotten much closer to the interstate since we started following it. There are people on the sides of the roads here into the underpasses getting protection. There are emergency vehicles on the highway out here tracing the storm. The air debris flying around this tornado, which is still about a half-mile wide.
Was that there wasn't any separation between the sky and the ground. Looking out over into the horizon, you usually see a middle part in between the blue sky and then the ground, but what it was a black mass about half a mile wide from the sky all the way to the ground, just completely black, just a pitch black. And of course the thunder and the lightning that went with it was setting off car alarms all the way. After it got within about a half a mile where I was standing, we took shelter, and then when it passed, followed it and went across the interstate and headed to Oklahoma City.
So you dashed then into this refrigerator freezer? Is that what happened?
What happened was there was I went to a strip mall there in Newcastle, Oklahoma, and there was people taking shelter in a grocery store. I had the latest report on where it was and where it was heading. I told everyone to go in. We all headed to the very back of the grocery store in a freezer. There's about 10 people in there. One person did suffer some heart trouble because when he opened the freezer door, lightning bolt struck the building. He was shocked.
Unbelievable. You then, though, as soon as the twister passed, chased it. Is that right?
Yeah, I was safely behind it. I wasn't right up on it or in the dangerous way, but I just kind of followed where you could tell that it was just leaving trash behind from cars being meshed around the interstate.
Jason, somehow I'm imagining your mom wouldn't have thought you were far enough away from that tornado.
No, not yet. No, not at all.
As you got a chance to see it, though, and see the devastation that tornado had caused, how would you describe the scene there in Oklahoma City?
It's the worst. I've been in Oklahoma most of my life, and it's the worst I've ever seen. And talking to some of the reporters here that's been here 15, 20 years, it's the worst they've ever seen. Tornado-wise, I've reported 5 of them for news organizations, and this is the worst one I've seen. Neighborhoods were erased in southern Oklahoma City, just erased.
Jason, we so much appreciate you taking a couple of moments with us this morning after what was obviously a really difficult and a very long night for you.
It has gotten very large at this time.
These are pictures just in from David Payne watching this storm. This is the one that he's been talking about, large tornado.
Huge, we call it a debris shroud out ahead of it, which is still packing quite a wall. There's still a lot of debris flying on the eastern side of it, anywhere from 90 to 100 miles an hour.
Mike, this is Mike.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
This storm is almost a mile wide. It is about a mile on the west side of H.E. Bailey right now. It seems to be following the path of the interstate pretty closely. It hasn't gotten much closer to the interstate since we started following it. There are people on the sides of the roads here into the underpasses getting protection. There are emergency vehicles on the highway out here tracing the storm.
Major tornado did major damage. It took out several structures, demolished several structures. I saw roofs. I saw telephone poles. I've seen everything in the air as it just crossed about a quarter of a mile north of me.
You can see they're exploding. The transformers it's still on the ground. It's just eating land.
I'm right here, Mike
Yes.
Morgan. We are a half a mile away from the turnpike gate between Chickasha and Oklahoma City. It looks like it's headed right for it. I see things coming out of the ground right now. We are inside a band of rain passing by us. There are electric flashes right now. Emergency vehicles are pulling over on the side of the road here.
There's a large one.
Yeah, the tornado is still wide, still intense right here. I see huge trees flying through the air, debris flying around this tornado, which is still about a half-mile wide.
Once again, those were pictures from yesterday, but today...
The radar near Oklahoma City freezes one frightening moment of many. Red represents the worst, a half-dozen spouts at one time. Amazing, even to one of the government's most experienced tornado experts and former storm chaser, Joe Golden.
This is an outbreak of historic proportions. No question about it.
Top winds reaching more than 260 miles an hour, twice that of an intense hurricane. Why the Weather Service ranks the highest winds, an incredible 5 on the tornado scale. An event so rare it occurs only once a year on average. And the location, Tornado Alley, catches some off guard. In a year dominated by the La Nina weather pattern, many thought tornadoes would be pushed further north to the Ohio Valley. So what happened in this case? 3 volatile systems colliding. Warm, moist air out of the Gulf of Mexico, dry air from a different direction, and a strong jet stream streaking overhead. Supercells boil up first. Huge thunderstorms like this replicated on a screen by government computers using real wind and moisture data. The whirling effect of the colliding winds adds the spin, turns the supercell into a spawning ground for a destructive funnel. Or sometimes, as shown in this computer image, many at one time, as in Oklahoma and Kansas, says the Weather Service's Don Wernley.
We had supercell thunderstorms, a lot of tornadoes, and they were all occurring in major metropolitan areas. This is a recipe for a problem.
Add to that the sheer size of the twister's paths.
Anytime you get a damaged swath of a half a mile, that's a very rare and a very extreme event, no question about it.
In a laboratory, researchers replicate the destructive power of tornado-strength winds and use a water tank to recreate a vortex. Study why the speed of the winds increases as the funnel shrinks tighter and tighter and the tornado stretches to the ground.
There's nothing else on this planet that compares to the concentration of energy that we find in a tornado.
In a year that already started badly with 169 deaths in January, now this, and the most dangerous time of year continues for almost another 2 months. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.